So to the streaming person, we can go live. Moment.
We have this issue to two parts. Muhammad will be talking about the post-digitalization, and I will give a brief about history of education in Islam. And
great. I would like to welcome you to the Amber Network Festival. This is a decentralized festival. We are streaming live. It's happening in more than 7 regions in the Swana region. Today is the first event from BAAB, from Khartoum, live about the Sudan education curriculum. And I'm really very much looking forward to this talk. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Also, I'm happy. Okay, we disconnected.
We can hear you, but we cannot see the camera.
Yes. So we are facing some difficulties, technical difficulties here.
No problem.
تعال شوف الصورة. قال ما في صورة.
There is a camera sign next to the microphone sign.
Right. I believe now you can see me now. Is it? Hello?
Hello.
We can hear you, but not see you.
Yeah, we cannot see you. Can you just disconnect and you start talking from the camera directly? It's not from the laptop directly. Don't connect the camera with the laptop.
Okay, yeah, you know me. I am ignorant in this technical stuff, but
no problem. Yeah.
Yes, I will ask the guys here to do this.
Okay, we give you 5 minutes more. If you are come, yes.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah. I
It sounds like we are having connection problems. So, hello everyone. This is Matthias again. As it seems, there are severe connection problems at the moment with Khartoum. There is the following solution. We will have here a talk with Rasha, who is in Berlin, who is part of BAAB, about the current situation. The talk will, in this very moment, be recorded, and we can see it later in our video platform. And also tomorrow there will be another discussion with the same people, so they can answer it then, hopefully without any connection problems. So Rasha will be with us shortly. Oh, I see. Khatum is back.
Hi again.
Great that you're here. Just keep on.
So, can you hear me now?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I was talking about the so-called modern education in Sudan, and I said that it has been started with the British colonialists in the early 19th century by the initiation of the British of the Gordon Memorial College and other few institutions distributed over the country here in Sudan. And the British start training the Sudanese people just to be civil servant to the purpose of you know, the purpose of doing the colonial service for the British people, and also I mentioned the girls education in Sudan, and it hasn't been started up to 1943, and this is in northern and in northern Sudan. In the south, education completely left to the missionaries, and it was run by the missionaries, and there was no one curricula in that part of the country, and there is no one educational system. So it was very complicated to have data about education in South Sudan, and it has been privatized after the independence in 1956. Education has been in Sudan has been run by the government, and the government was responsible for this. I do have some statistics here about education, but I'm afraid that we are running out of time due to this technical difficulties we are facing here in Khartoum. I'm sorry for that. I cannot mention it now, but what I want to check it to you that our past education was better than our present, and in quality and even in quantity. And it is shame to say that for Sudanese educator like me, but this is the reality. We cannot run from it. We cannot escape it. The education in Sudan after the independence has been expanded. Many schools being built. Institutions for teacher trainings initiated, but in 1991, this was a turning point in the history of the Sudanese education, with the so-called yes, with the English regime, but the education conference 1991. This education conference was a catastrophe for the Sudanese educational system. The Sudanese educational system has been deteriorating since the 80s of the last century, but in 1991, as I said, it was a turning point in this regard, because this conference, the education conference held in 1991 by the Islamist regime, decided to shut down the teachers training institutions and to modify and change the curriculum, and due to their yes, due to the ideological orientations, and also due to their economical orientations, which was heading to privatization of the educational system and the educational sector in general, and that was a very big deterioration for the educational system in Sudan, and for the curricula, and many subjects being removed from the curricula, like history. There was no more history in the curricula. Yeah, you can imagine that. There is no geography, there is no science, but it was something mixed. How do they call it? نحن والعالم المعاصر. We are the birth world, and other subjects which is not at all specialized in anything, and they never give any knowledge to the pupils in the schools. After the fall down of the Islamist regime in 2019, there was a trial to fix this, and this trial to fix the curricula faced by a campaign from the Islamists themselves. And I believe now we are harvesting what have been planted for 30 years in Sudan, and here in this time of pandemic, corona pandemic, now the Sudanese educational institution is not ready at all for this, I believe, because our children, after the privatization of the educational system, they are not being trained to use laptops or computers or iPads or anything to deal with this matter. So Sudan and the total global south is suffering, with few exceptions like Rwanda, maybe also South Africa, but the global south is suffering, and Sudan is just a model for such countries. But we are not ready to deal with this type of education, this kind of education which depends on this technology, distant education. Maybe Mohammed Suleiman here can give a better idea about the situation here in Sudan in the time of pandemic, better than me, because he's specialized on this. So I will leave the plot for him, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in on this conference, and it's my pleasure to speak about the consequences of COVID-19 for education in the post-digital era. I'm very pleased that my colleague Marwan has contextualized our educational system and gave us some general idea about how we come to today's world, speaking from a historical perspective of the educational practice. Talking about post-digital era, and when we talk about post-digital era, actually we are indexing a digital era. So talking about post-digital, digital, talking about modern, post-modern, and such eras is not only era but also a perspective we can take to think about issues and what's going on around us. So regarding the post-digital era in Sudan, COVID-19 pandemic present a concrete situation that can deeply test our place and our locus in the post-digital era in general. So here in Sudan, as the pandemic break, all face-to-face educational activities are to be cancelled. And when we talk about the context of the pandemic in Sudan, it is not only a context of health emergency, but rather a context of other emergencies. These are economical emergencies, natural disasters, political emergencies. In the last 3 years, as you know, we are living in a time of political transition, and it's a very hard political transmission in the country, and we are now witnessing an ongoing protest, and the people are still protesting in Khartoum, and there is still very intricate context of political transmission. And in the last 3 years, as I told, we are not only talking about health emergency and the pandemic, but also we have other pandemics in different areas in the country, and we also witness natural disasters at the floods. And before the floods, as the protest break, the ex-government, the government of al-Bashir has blocked all the teaching activities in the different areas in the country. And there was a lockdown for more than 7 months for almost all universities in the country. So the lockdown during the pandemic is not is not the first in the last 2 or 3 years, but it was followed by one or more lockdowns due to other emergencies. So when we talk about the pandemic in Sudan, we are talking about very intricate situation of political, economic, and natural disaster crises. And it is much more complicated than anywhere else. We are also witnessing an under-resourced country in a time of political transition and under-resourced educational institutions. So in the time of the pandemic, as the pandemic break in Sudan and the cases of COVID-19 was reported by the Ministry of Health, the Sudanese government, the health authorities, and the different peoples started to take action to combat the pandemic. And for the educational curriculum, it was a real test for whether we are able to digitize or die. So digitizing or dying is a metaphor appeared in the time of the pandemic. The people are challenged by the new context of the pandemic, and are surrounded by risk of the contagious disease, and going to schools, having face-to-face classroom activities and educational activities endangers people of getting COVID virus. And as the educational activities being cancelled, people are thinking about alternatives for such a situation. And in such context, our educational system was being challenged in the post-digital era. So when we talk about the post-digital era, we are talking about a changing context, a time of changes, and theoretically speaking, from a philosophy of technology's perspective, the post-digital era is an era where the boundaries between the online and the offline, between the real and the unreal, between the cyber and physical are becoming fuzzier, and it is very difficult to distinguish between these situations. And if you look at the urban Sudanese areas, you will find that there is a high level of digitalization. People are using smartphones. They are using their phones to do so many things. You can get electricity through many applications at your phone. You can use so many things to get these. So almost all people in urban areas owns smartphones or phones with one degree or another, and but it is not the same case in rural areas or less urban areas, where even internet connectivity and communication availability is challenged. In so many areas in Khartoum, there is problem of internet connectivity, particularly suburbs of Khartoum and in other regions. There are some places in Sudan, it is very hard to find internet connectivity. But if we talk about the pandemic context from an urban perspective in Sudan, it was a real challenge for the people to run a digitized education. So in the educational policies of Sudan, if we consult the general educational documents, for instance, the general curricular document, it's reference framework for policy. And in this curricular document, there is some section about digitizing educational or curricular content. And in this document, it's being stipulated that there is an acknowledgement of the changing world and the digitizing processes in this world, and even there is an acknowledgement of the ever fast changing world, and the need for digitizing, and the need for being indulged with the informational technology culture. But if you look on practice what's going on during the time of the pandemic, we will find ourselves very remote in terms of application for technology. And as the schools closed, people in the Ministry of Education officials were thinking about alternatives in such emergency context. And also different universities, public and private, were thinking about how to resolve the problem of connectivity. If we take the example of private educational institutions, I mean the private universities, many private universities successfully implemented synchronous and asynchronous learning experience. But when you look at these private universities, were able to access such online education or educational system for their students because of their economical resources. But when you compare them to governmental universities, most of governmental universities were unable to access online education. And one good example is the example of Khartoum University. The Vice Chancellor, the Chancellor of the Director of Khartoum University, Fadwa Abdurrahman Taha, has a well-known speech about the university's inability to access or to afford online education. She literally said that the infrastructure of the Khartoum University is not ready to transform to online education. When you talk about Khartoum University is the oldest university in the country, and as Marwan has reviewed, it was Gordon Memorial College was the first nucleus of this university. It's more than a century old university, but
it is the most well-equipped university, public university actually.
Even this university declared its inability to run online education. And even when you look to the experience of other universities, you will not find very sophisticated systems. And online education where usually are examples of using social media in education, using WhatsApp, using Telegram, using social media applications to send voice materials, to send PDF, to send such materials. But talking about online synchronous education was beyond the abilities of most of universities in the country. And even some universities started training their staff on some applications such as Moodle, such as Zoom, and so on. But even vast majority of staffs have problems of these platforms, and there is so many problems with this And these problems are not only to do with technology, but also with our politics and with our situation. For example, Zoom as an application, Zoom was not, we are not allowed in Sudan to access Zoom because of the sanctions on the country at some time, and this reflect our reflect the consequences of the Islamist regime of al-Bashir on Sudan regarding the sanctions on the people, because we we were not able to access so many applications due to the sanctions, and the state of digitization was partly due to these sanctions is very remote. And regarding also the curriculum and its content and its industry in the in Sudan, we can also talk about one point of the dependency on Eurocentric textbook industry in Sudan. Most of education curricula and textbook were dependent on Eurocentric textbook industry.
Now unmuted.
And when we talk about this dependency, it's so many curricula were based on when in European textbook industry, and one of the latest curriculum, as Marwan has mentioned, in the post-revolution time, there was a very great conflict between revolutionaries and anti-revolutionary forces, between the government and the followers of the Islamist rule, or the beneficiaries of this system. So when we talk about, we have to move because of technological problems, electricity, and these things. So there was great conflicts between the revolutionary forces and anti-revolutionary forces regarding the curriculum, and these conflicts were partly about the content of education. So the new government has launched a reform for the educational curricula, and such a reform entails a reform on educational content, and new curricula were introduced. And part of this new curricula was a new history curriculum that make a very great fuss in the country, and people were launching very great debate on this issue. And one of these debates about introducing some historical content about the European Renaissance and some artwork for Michelangelo. Michelangelo's
it's a famous piece actually.
Michelangelo piece
from Sistine
on Adam's creation.
Yes.
Has made a lot of debate in the country, but the debate were not about the content of this image. The debate was about the debate itself about the educational issues was for non-educational issues, for political issues of reform, for political economy of textbook industry, because the textbook industry in the country was an industry, and there were so many beneficiaries of this industry, and the issues of privatization for educational industry were being recalled because many textbooks being published are not published by the government or are not published by government publishing house. They are publishing by private houses, and these private houses, for them, the process of educational change is financially a burden to them, and there is a danger of they need to plug battery because the battery is low. So this is an example of challenges of educational curricula were due to political conflicts, and when we talk about the state of art and digitization about these processes, I could say we are very remote, and there is disparity between the state of digitalization in education and outside educational spheres. When we talk about the state of digitization outside educational spheres, we'll find that people are striding much more than education. And a good example is the example of employing social media and digital technology during the revolution. And during the revolution, the people were employing digital technology in very creative ways, and online technologies, live streaming, have played a very important role in the previous protests. Even the very common example of the first massacre to be live streamed in the world was the massacre of the Khartoum sit-in. And this is a good example of how digital technology is at variance between educational context. Educational technology, the infrastructure of educational institutions, the privatization of education, and the bad investment from the Bashir's regime on education has caused a very fragile educational infrastructure, and our students are not just talking about needing digitization. They are lacking the very basic infrastructure of education. They are lacking textbook facilities, notebook facilities. Even the very basic things are not available. And when we talk about schools themselves, and the schools are just like prisons in so many areas in the country. Very bad classroom conditions, lack of ventilation, lack of lighting, lack of basic seating infrastructure, lack of blackboard even. And the European idea of the school, a nice building with classrooms, with neat seating, is not available even in suburban areas in Khartoum. So many schools lack basic seating. Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to ask
seating.
if you're gonna give us, like, because we are 5 minutes above the time now, and if we're gonna have because I think there's a lot of people will have a question. Personally, I have some question, like following what you are saying here. And it brings to my mind one question when you're talking about the fact of the pandemic and the relation to the digitalized education system now, and what like most of the third world or like third world country, what is faced it's like it's not the time to, like, I know now it's like Facebook, it could be possible to get in it without having internet in like worldwide. But the question of like, it is like after this pandemic and concern to the situation of the economical difference between like many countries. Imagine if Khartoum University have education, like access to student to have and all the class by digital like conference, and it can be like but like who have money to have the amount of like gigabyte to go to even if you have a laptop, to have an economical base to make you to buy the internet itself from those MTN, Ariba, or like Zain, all these companies in Sudan, and they are like earning million every month in a poor country like this. So due to this, I was thinking more of the question of like, if you from this pandemic we start thinking ourselves over the situation of like, it is like the internet access is not a human right, basic need became in all of this situation exactly in the pandemic. It's and this question, I think more like teacher and lecturer and like all people like in the education sector, they are very in connect of the problem of it now as a problem. So I know we're gonna have time tomorrow. We can go more and talk about this kind of situation. But I was thinking of like the post, like the relation of like the colonialism, and then as a fact, and then and and the difference between the world economical from, like as you say, as like the student in Khartoum, even they don't have a board, it's like in certain place or certain school, so. And now we are moving to different problem. It's not like we're not talking about the board. We're talking about like access to something. It was very normalized. It's to be, if you have a money, you buy it. You don't have a money, you don't get it. It's not a human basic need. Do you make my point?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I do agree with you that the issue of access to technology is governed by disparities in the economical situation, in the economical statuses of the individuals. But if you talk about this from an institutional perspective, Khartoum University's highest level, highest administrative level, the rector of Khartoum University has declared that their institution infrastructure is not ready to enroll in any digital education. You see, and I know so many studies that surveyed different students about their ability to access online education. So many studies report that the students are not ready to access such educations. They do not have facilities to access such situations. And even when we talk about the issue of the different economical problems of the students, we cannot separate them from the level of the pandemic because they are interrelated. The students' economical statuses, because we are talking about locus, we are talking from a certain situations, and there is a geopolitics of our speech. So when we talk about the pandemic in Sudan, the pandemic of the post-digital era is not just talking about technologies, software and hardware technologies, online and offline fuzzy situations. We are talking about economical, social, political situations, because all these things are related, and even we cannot separate them. And economical, political situations have, technological abilities of the people has implications for their ability to access education, and the real problem is that you have talked about colonialism, and colonialism as a state is a state of Sudan has over, but when we talk about the world orders and the patterns of thinking about the world, if we talk from a global south perspective, the image or the conception of the classroom or the conception of technology is not the commonly held conception in the global north. So the idea is not only disparity in the technologies, but also at the epistemological level. When we talk about what constitutes a classroom, is not the same in Europe, because a classroom in some nomadic areas can be defined as a camel and a blackboard. Whenever the camel settle down, they attach the blackboard to a tree and they start teaching. And the conception of the classroom is not the same architectural conception as in Europe. So these contextual issues are always in the background, and you cannot ignore them in any way.
Yeah, and in addition to this, from a personal experience, maybe Mohammed mentioned this institutional perspective of the readiness of the Sudanese institutions, and he took Khartoum University as an example. But also, I would like to mention that even our students in the faculty of education, I can say that 80% of our students are from rural areas, and in some areas even they don't have clean water, drinking water, let alone that having internet connectivity. So Sudan, as an example for the global south, is not ready. With a few examples I mentioned, like Rwanda, maybe South Africa, maybe they can face this time of pandemic. As for the colonialism, I believe Muhammad said a good thing about this, especially when he mentioned the textbook, the school textbook. It's always been considered or imagined in this European perspective, and here in Sudan we do have different, a very different. Yeah, not only in Sudan, even inside Sudan we have a very diverse differences and diverse people from area to area, and all this diversity should be represented in the textbooks, in the curriculum. And I believe Muhammad wrote something about this, the representation of the Sudanese people, the different Sudanese people in the school textbooks. So we have this Sudanese context. It has to be this context, the Sudanese context. It has to be considered we don't have to copy anybody blindly. If you can hear me. But
Yeah, we hear you. And
yeah.
this will bring us to the topic. I'm really happy with this lecture you are giving, the two of you, and for me this was really awesome. But I was thinking more, maybe this we can take it tomorrow to more like the part of the discussion. I was very I would like we more can talk about like the debate was this political debate, like Muhammad was saying about it was not about the education, but it was about the political point of view of the different group, and they forgot the topic of the education itself. But I will bring the topic. Is like I'm very concerned of the topic. It's really was needed this kind of and the اللوحة, I don't know what it's called in English, the portrait of Michelangelo. And exactly when I think about the situation of Sudan and the lack of a lot of things, the basic thing, you know, as a student in this grade itself, why is it important to have this? You know, I would like as to go to this with you in more like an education method of understanding why I need really to show this picture in this book, or I need to show tools. It look like we are in a lack of tools, in the basic tools, yeah, in the same time. And
it's not like this, Raya.
Yeah.
You know, European Renaissance is a very important part of the human history. It's a human heritage. It's not European anymore. And if we want to take any step forward, we have to study others. We don't have to alienate them. Alienating people is not what we are saying. What we are saying is considering our own local context, but studying European history, including this era, which is European Renaissance. It's very important for our children to know about this period in the human history, and how Europe woke up from its very long sleep. How the flash of light flash there. It's important to know this. Yeah.
And I have also something to say about this, and what we mean about Eurocentric views of the curriculum. We're not talking about the content of education, such as including images or pieces of European history. It's important in education to include cultural content from other places of the world, and it is a part of it's an important agenda of any educational curricula is to be acculturated with others, and it's part of knowing others. We don't have a problem with including some selections from the World Heritage or from whatever, but when we mention this example, we would like to tell you that the content of education is an issue of debate in today's Sudan, and the debate is not for educational purposes, but it's for political purposes. And I think we would have much more debate. Here we're talking about content, but not technology in the literal sense of the word.
If there is no further question, I believe that we have already surpassed our time, and we're happy to be here again. And tomorrow we shall meet. Thank you very much for listening to us. And if Muhammad has something to say.
Okay, I'm very pleased to have this discussion, and I would like to say one brief word about when we talk about digitalization or post-digitalization or whatever period or perspective. Our reference is not what is stipulated on theory or the conceptual ideas, but our reference is practice. What really happens in the context of Sudan? We are talking about because the post-digital as an idea or a perspective need to be seen from a very local perspective and need to be tested at this perspective. And there is no universal notion of post-digitalization because contextual examples are always providing challenges and providing much debate about the issue and also help us to understand. I think tomorrow will be much speech about discussion, questions about this issue. Thank you for giving us this time, and thank you for questions and discussion also.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying, I'm like, thanks a lot, Marwan and Muhammad, for all the awesome information and lecture you give it to us. And yeah, tomorrow we're gonna go more to this talk and concerning the curriculum of Sudan. Matthias, are you there? And Ekmal or the other, if someone have a question or looking for to understand something and briefly, can you say it now or we can move to tomorrow?
I would like to say thank you very, very much, and I'm looking very much forward to tomorrow's talks, and I'm sure I have a lot of questions at the end of tomorrow.
Yeah, but let me tell you that tomorrow we'll be talking about the post-digitalization in the context of the Sudanese revolution, Sudanese revolution perspective. Maybe we can have this talk about curriculum on board also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and looking forward for tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.